All right, as I was saying, we started with empowering communities and went through the various kinds of elements that would go into building empowering communities. And that was to be the introduction to this set of the five uh, presentations. And the second one then was worldview and personal transformation. And we are very much into the whole idea of both personal transformation and organizational transformation. So we're now getting closer and into the organizational transformation part. And how do we do that? And how do we continue to activate the empowering communities at the same time? One of the things is that everybody is a leader, okay? The, sometimes the confusion is we have roles that different people hold throughout the time that we're together, and sometimes we call it the leadership. But in the long run, everyone is a leader, and everyone grows in leadership. And so that's what I want to introduce at this time. But before that, as you know, Lynn had the third presentation where she tried to embed the Benedictine charism and heritage into this idea of communities of leadership. And we continue with that in this presentation where we'll talk about both the mission and how that fits into the whole leadership, and then some stages of leadership that are the growth stages. And we talk about growth in faith and love of God, and also love of one another and all creation. So we're always focused on this idea of growth, and a growth in through the transformational process, both personally and organizationally. And so now we move into this whole idea of the organizational transformation. And with that, we have to take a look at what are the trends? What do we have to look for? Why would we be even doing this? And we realize that, well, there's a lot going on in the world. And what is it that we can have an effect with, or that has an effect on us? And so to consider that, of course, the pandemic was in there, and we're still, you know, in recovery stage with respect to the pandemic. We know there's power plays and violence, and we hear that every day on the news. We also have been trying to develop an awareness of evolutionary consciousness. And my last presentation, as you recall, I used two parts of that consciousness, personal transformation, the idea of being conscious and really working on that, and the idea of being present to the situation. Two things that will help in the development of personal transformation. And then we know, too, that we have various demographic shifts and also inequalities, and that goes on all the time. We've had environmental and climate change, and we've done a lot in that area, and we will continue to do that. Now we're into the technology, which I can't handle, but anyway, and AI. Now I put this together a while back, and I just had AI as a question mark. But since that time, which is not a long time ago, there has been so much going on with AI. The news I listened to just the other day was how AI is helping the blind because they can show a picture of something and say, what is it? And it tells them, it tells the person. So AI is mushrooming very fast, but it could also go negatively because I'm sure that professors in universities wonder where the theme papers are coming from, because AI can put one together very quickly. Then another thing is the whole interconnected world. The fact that we can get the news and know what's going on in other parts of the country, it's just magnified. And so all of this is going on, and it affects Holy Wisdom Monastery. And we can either do something relative to that or not. And choosing what we can do because of our mission. And it's all based on the mission. So when we look at change, and we say, okay, we want to do this idea of having empowering communities, that would be somewhat of a change, or it's recognizing what we already do. And a lot of empowerment goes on throughout the workings of Holy Wisdom Monastery. So this isn't really something new, it's just maybe acknowledging what we would like to be. And how can we do that? All right, but when we look at change, there's a lot going on, and who's going to lead whatever change it is? Also, why do we want to change? Why do we want to do something differently than we've been doing? And we look at that and we say, oh, well, maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's not. The specifics, we have to look at the specifics of what the change will be and how to deal with it. Also, is the change in the people, or is it in the thinking, or is it in policies and procedures? Is it in the culture? Where is this change taking place, and how will it change things? Do we have the skills, the technology? I don't have the technology, but anyway, somebody's going to have it. And so where do we start? Where do we start if we want to make a change? So in thinking through that, this is an interesting little part of this. And basically, with any change, there are 4 components of it. And if the change makers do not consider the 4 different things, we're in trouble. And things will not adequately get changed. The first one is the individual and the internal part. We hear that there's a change. An emotion, it comes into being. And we either get excited about the change, or we're leery about the change, we don't like the change. Whatever the case may be, that's almost the first response. The second response, if you get to it in quadrant 2, is to personally say, do I have the skills to deal with the change? It's still very personal at that point. Can I make the change? And how is it going to affect me? Do I have the skills? Do I have the personal spark to do it? To really get into that change. Then the third quadrant is a little bit later realization. How does it change the culture? And we know that we have tried to put a culture of right relationship into place. And we've talked about that considerably. And we want to have a welcoming culture. We want people to feel safe when they come, safe to be able to talk to one another, and we want to be open with that kind of relationship. How is the change going to affect the collective community? And since we are always talking about communities, and communities will be affected differently by different changes. Then the fourth quadrant is the external factors, more or less. Do we have to change our mission with the change? That's the tough one. Do we have to reorganize with the change? Do we have to put different policies in? What do we have to do with the change? And that's any change that goes on that's going to affect the whole organization. So in looking at that, then, we have to consider, we're talking about communities of empowerment. And we'd have to look at all these factors to say, how is it going to affect all those factors? If we don't, we've got a mess. So the 4 quadrants of change require individual consciousness, and that affects things. The culture stimulates everything, so that, is part of the change. The organizational structure to make things work has to be built in there. And also, the consciousness shapes and guides the shape of the design system. And see, I get caught up in systems. And I work puzzles, jigsaw puzzles all the time, to find out how the pieces fit together. It's kind of interesting, and some don't. But it's a matter of taking all the pieces that we have and saying then, okay, does this piece fit at this point in time with this part of the change? So there's obvious things to building the system. So here we are, Holy Wisdom Monastery. It's the home of Benedictine women of Madison and a community of ecumenical Benedictine communities that weaves prayer, hospitality, justice, and care for the earth into a shared way of life, community. Okay. We've had this since 2013. And I know because I facilitated the meeting where we had the whole community, all the communities that existed at that particular time, and we took the mission that was originally developed around 92, that mission, and tried to synthesize it a little bit more because it was 2 pages. Okay, and so we built it into 3 parts. This was the first part. And the second part, and I'm probably in the way, Holy Wisdom welcomes people into sacred space here and outside, also at the other building. That was the intention of the sacred space. And our community of communities to pray, study, nourish one another. Okay? And then compelled by the gospel, rooted in the Benedictine tradition, we support personal and community growth in faith, love of God, one another, and all creation, as we live out our mission in values in a changing world. And we already know that the world is changing. And so it's a continual looking at that. And the other part of it was the values that we aspire to and practice, balance being this year's. Okay? So we have this mission. This is the same mission that was written in 92, and that was handed out at the first time we met. It has not changed. Okay, so we have the whole idea then of mission leadership. One of the factors of leadership, okay, based on the mission. And we have to consider with any change that we put in, does it change the mission? So, given that, we'd like to be mission driven. In other words, all that we do is to carry out that mission. Now, several of us in here were meeting all last week as Dominicans, okay? That is not the mission we're talking about. But it's a matter of, that was the Dominican mission. Okay, that's fine. This place is the Benedictine mission and values, as we have stated. And it should permeate everything that we do. That's the governance, it's the administration, it's all the communities. And we would hope that we accomplish that. And also, we see it. We see it all over. It's visible. It's tangible. And we continue to try to do that in whatever kinds of things we put on. For instance, next 2 weeks, is it 2 weeks, 3 weeks? We're going to have John Philip Newell. Okay, why? Because that's part of our mission. It further expands it. It'll be expanding our worldview to be more encompassing of the world and what he has to say for us and what can we learn. Okay, then we've got
I have a question, because this is a critical place you're at right now. With John Newell, he has a preface, but he does not have the experience of this group as long as we've been.
That's true, yes.
He is seeing this, he's excited, but he isn't a dirty participant. He's not in the midst of making this all work. He is excited about it, but I really feel he has to enter into the mechanics and the mess.
Well, yes, and we will see how that works out. But he's coming, and we will be participating in that in many different ways. So keep that in your mind. Okay, the fullness of the mission is realized when it directs the decision-making, the strategic planning, and the operational implementation. In other words, everything we do is considering the mission and how we play that out. And so whether it's budgeting or resource development, is it towards the mission? And that's what we want to see continually, to be mission-driven. So let's see where I go here. Oh yeah. Now there are parts that we have to consider. If we look at this, we know we have programs and services. Okay, that's what we provide. And we have administration, we have the leadership team and that, and we have governance. And all of those three are focused by the mission. It's that mission part that we evaluate whatever we do against. Okay? So mission leadership. How does it play out a little bit farther? It has to be understood. The mission has to be understood, that what we just talked about. It also has to be owned by everybody, owned by all the communities if we want to have something, we want to realize it. So we have to do that. It has to be integrated into everything we do, and it has to be a transformative process. Personal transformation, organizational transformation, and all those trends that we started with. How are we transforming the world? It's just a small job. Okay, so understanding and ownership. What are we trying to understand, in other words? First of all, we have the response to the gospel. And we would assume that we would have evolutionary response to the gospel. Okay, that's one of the decisions. Whoops, there's Dominican. This was the wrong thing. Think Benedictine. I have several versions. The institution's purpose. Now, this is a comparison. Our Cincinnati is apostolic. We go out from the mother house to someplace else. This is monastic. Everything takes place in the monastery. And that's why the place is very important in putting anything together. So the next phase, though, Okay, so we've got those three things. We've got the Benedictine charism and heritage, and the fact that it is a monastery, and the fact that we are talking about evolutionary response to the gospel, which we have been working on. Then to integrate everything that we do then into whether it's the programs and services that we do, whether it's the organization culture and environment, and also the systems, the operational systems that we have. And that's where I play around, is all the systems have to be working as well towards this mission. And these are some of the systems that we might have or not. Or do we need or not? Or how are they built into this? Then the third part of it, the transformation part, that we are doing personal transformation and we're working on the organizational transformation to transform the world. Now that's a small thing to take under consideration, but that's what we're really into. And we have to think about that as far as the mission is concerned. And looking at it from that perspective, then ask the question, are we mission driven? And are we integrating everything into that and considering that mission all the time? Now, we're talking about becoming communities of empowerment. A little side effect with that, it means not just here, but it also means that one community empowers another community. We have a variety of communities, and we consider all the groups that come together a community of empowerment to one another. And we also empower beyond here. And for instance, the whole program that we have, that Nancy directs, the ECCSR, that is intentionally empowering beyond the monastery. But that's not the only way. For instance, you all probably meet with others who are not necessarily connected with the monastery. But how do you empower them maybe to think of some of the ways that we work together? So it's going beyond the monastery. But there's also this idea of how can we track things to see that we are able to be accountable for what we do. And that is part of it too. And so we can build that in and be able to, that means collecting some metrics, in case you haven't used that word before. But it's relevant. And do we track what we do? And how do we do that? So, personal transformation has been worked on. We've been trying to do the personal transformation part in the way we live, in the way we order our values, and also the sacredness of going deeper, and how do we create the space so that going deeper is possible. And we work on that. We're intentional about it. And also the way we're connected and interdependent. All these are kind of words that continue to describe what we are about, what we want to be about. So now we can move into organizational transformation. And what that is, as far as changing, and changing goes on periodically, and how do we, at the same time, maintain our connection with the mission and try to work with that in whatever changes we have. So we've talked about the idea of listening, dialogue, consensus, if you know how to do it. If you don't know how to use consensus, then don't try to use it. But we try to use consensus to accomplish decisions. But I think we need work on that one. Building relationships and connections with everybody in the congregation, in the communities. We have some articulating some assumptions, forming a shared vision for the future. An organization, this is an interesting little statement. An organization cannot organize at a higher level of performance than the consciousness of the leadership. Now, everybody is a leader, okay? Some are in leadership positions. Doesn't make any difference where you are. It's still the same thing. In other words, everybody has to be on the same page if we want to move up in organizational transformation. And we can work on that. So we get into transformational leadership. Now, it's a little, we haven't been going too long, but I'd like to take a break at this particular time for about 15 minutes, talk to one another on the way to getting coffee or whatever. Transformational leadership, it can be referred to in many different ways, but I came across this while I was trying to prepare for the talks and found mastering leadership. And this has stages of leadership. And so that's what I wanted to make the connections with. In this, then, if you look at transformation, there's all kinds of stages of transformation. And basically, we can be transformed from the spiritual perspective, from a learning perspective, from a skill perspective. There are all kinds of things that, if you look up transformation, there's just all kinds of things that come along with it. The greatest problems, though, can't be solved necessarily, but they can move into a different realm through transformation. In other words, we can grow into something that would help us to do a better job with various issues and problems. So, you saw this quote before. An organization cannot transform to a higher level of performance than the consciousness of the leadership. That's the same statement that was quoted before. This is the guy who has put this whole international leadership growth process together. And there's loads on the web and several books as well on this whole process. The process of cultural evolution of awareness increases the development of the organization involved. The likelihood of regression to an early level of awareness is lessened when the platform is built for the next evolutionary step. So in other words, we're building something. And this is the story of evolution of humankind. And we're not finished, okay? So this is getting into the flow in relationship to leadership. And we have, again, this is from Mastering Leadership. And leaders develop. They're not born, you know. We have to grow into different things. And the change of that, the change we need can happen. Sometimes we need some guidance to move to the next level. Well, this group that, as I said, it's international, they've thought of everything. And there's loads of research that shows how these stages can move through life. And so basically, something that was not doable at an earlier stage can be doable at a higher stage. Nancy?
So in an earlier slide, you quoted Ted Dunn's
Yes.
individual is spiral.
Yeah.
Where does that line up with your understanding of
Well, it is, you can use a spiral because, you know, you go back and forth sometimes too. But it is sort of a spiral that goes up and you keep going. And so how can we get on track? That's basically, that's what we want to do. So this starts with childhood, okay? Now this, it replicates the things that are on your paper. And thinking in terms of different players, perhaps, where are you? Don't put anything down yet, though, because you don't know where you are. Where some family member, where are they? A friend. Oh yeah, I'm in the. A friend might, you could name a friend where they are. Political scene is loaded with various levels of leadership. So let's look at this. This is the egocentric. And basically, this is childhood. And I have several grand nieces and nephews. And basically, if they want something, they cry. Okay? They're leading. And what do? You follow. And you try to figure out what their problem is. But they can't rationalize to tell you. So they're leading at a very low level that looks at self. This is my need. I have this need. And I want it. Okay? Well, the only thing the way they communicate is by crying. Okay, so then you try to figure it out. But their needs get met, probably, because parents try to meet their needs. But that's a level of leadership. As the child grows, though, they tend to realize, oh yeah, wait a minute, there's a better way that I can get this than just screaming. I have to learn how to play the game, how to get what I want by some tangible means. And it's interesting how they sort it out. They do. And then they figure out there's a little society out there that maybe I have to be interactive with that group, and so I can get what I still need. Now, they're a little bit more alert to what's out there, but it's still very much an I thing. This is what I'm looking for. Now, how do I get it? So this is the adolescent level. It's childhood, adolescent. But the mindset of an adolescent is normal, working through these things. If it continues into adulthood, it's a little destructive. So if you think of somebody now in any of those columns, that you would say that, wait, that's childish. The way that person is acting is childish. They're in this level, okay? Now, the next level that you get to is called reactive. And basically, at this level, and this is a young adult beyond trying to work through college and trying to find themselves, which is the logical route to go. And so they find, okay, I'll just comply, and I'm okay with that. I can survive, and if you like me, fine. If not, that's fine too. So that's kind of a complying level of leadership. The other one, though, is protecting. And that is, I will take care of you, and then will be recognized. I'm pretty smart at this, and I can handle it, and I'll take care of you. And so that's a leadership style. And then you get into the controlling type, that once they see the power that they can continue with and get what they want, so that's how they create it, at the expense of people. So I have the solution, and I'm right. That's another level of leadership. Okay? So as you think about, do you know anybody, in these three areas? Are they young adults? Are they adults? Where are they? What are they doing? Okay, we're not going to solve the world's problems on these three levels. We've got to do more. So we get to the creative level. Now this is, again, the whole idea of considering others in the package, and more the idea of we. We can do this. We can do this together. We can solve this. We can be creative about how we solve it. And it's teamwork. It's doing it together. It's collaboration. It's all the things that we're talking about as far as transformative leadership. And how do we build that kind of a culture? How do we invite people into that culture? And are we aware of, oh yeah, so-and-so has some good talents in this area. Let's bring those people together. And creative problem solving is right in this whole area. And yeah, we can work on the vision this way. We can get a lot done together. And so that's another level of the leadership. And you get to, it can be fun. It can be learning from one another. And it can be that whole idea of empowering one another to contribute. But there's another stage. There's another one. And it's called integral. And this stage is where we are psychologically, socially in the world and what it needs. And the complexity of reality is not getting less, it's getting more complex. We think, okay, we've got all these ways of connecting with people. That makes it more complex. We've got all this technology, it makes it more complex. Everything that's going on is increasing the complexity in the world. So how can we really focus on that? And what do we need at this level to solve some of the problems of that complexity? And how do we bring them into the whole scene? And there are some things that can be built into this that people can learn and work at this level. So for instance, as I mentioned before, I look at systems and I kind of say, I look for the system that needs to be in place to make something work. And basically, it's trying to get all the connections that have to be when you're trying to solve a problem, or build it in. And my thing is building it in. so that you know when a situation occurs, where you can go, who you can contact, who you can get in for help. And it's not a puzzle, it's a reality that works. And that's just one of the areas in this integral level of leadership that it's a learned thing. You can learn it. And how do we help one another to do that is the next question. How do we get to the next level? And if you notice, there is a difference between what is the whole, and this gets us to at least recognizing there's a bigger picture. And that's why you need systems to make the connections. So we are individually and collectively a microcosm of every system we try to lead, because we're in it. And here we're in a system collectively to realize something that we want to realize as far as our mission is concerned. Now this is a high level of leadership, but there's a higher one, and that's the unitive. And the unitive brings in the spirit and the realization of all creation as one. And it's a terrific realization, I think, that you can find the oneness in creation, but you can also find it in relationships and building the unitive way together. It's not something, though, that you kind of stay there. You go back and forth to the integral level to do some of the work, and to the creative level to do some of the work that needs to be done. But the neat thing is the inspiration of the Spirit. And I think that we have the potential at Holy Wisdom to move together to these higher stages of leadership. But we have to do it together. We have to challenge one another, share our skills and talents with one another, and kind of build to the next steps. But there's all kinds of help out there. There's an assessment that tells you where you are at the present time. There's a whole work, it's called scaling leadership, and it takes you to one step after the other. And I think, when we talk about small groups, stuff like that, I think it would be really neat if, we were able to say, yeah, let's go with this. And let's build these smaller groups that are comfortable with one another and work together to, empower one another to move up the scale of leadership. I have taken the assessment. Lynn has taken the assessment. We haven't figured it all out yet, though. But all the resources are there. That's what I want to be sure you know, that it's available, and you get a coach. And the coach then will assist with that. And I've been in contact with the place, the coach. I have a coach. And I'm trying to tell them what we're trying to do. And I know that they'd be curious enough to want to help. This is an international organization. The research has been done in all the different countries. And I'm sure that it's based on solid research. Also, I thought, now, is this person, this Bob Anderson, when he started talking about the unitive, and I thought, well, no, is this evangelical, or where is this coming from? Well, he's Jesuit educated, so I figured, okay, that might be, we can handle that. But the thing is that it's not an impossible thing if we put our minds to it, I think, and we decide to do this. It gets into this whole idea of being a servant leader. And the servant leader is serving others. And how can we serve one another? Looking at the needs, helping with building our own critique of one another and being able to kind of sort that out. And in a sense, I'm going to be recommending this to our newly elected leadership, to do this together. They don't know one another, but the idea of bonding as a new leadership group, it seems to me that this would be a helpful thing to pursue. And to be in that category then of empowering others. And then we'd be able to say how we empower beyond the monastery as well in this kind of a leaderships. So these are some of the characteristics of servant leadership, and some that we can look to for ourselves and determine, yeah, that's true, we can do this. And I think it would be a helpful thing across the board, to really tackle something together that is not in our immediate, responsibility. It's out there a little bit, and the mixture of people could be great. So the whole thing then leads to that next level of global transformation. And we've got all the elements. We've got, the justice we're talking about. We're talking about nonviolent communication, right, Mary? And we're talking about care for the earth, a resolution to world crisis, stuff like that. So the thing is, I think we are ready to launch if we can say this is where we're going. That the transformational power of mission, and going back to that mission, empowers, the Sinsinawa Dominicans also empowers Holy Wisdom Monastery and the community of communities for global transformation. Think we can do it? Yeah.
Just have to be put on the potter's wheel.
That's it.